Well, day 6 of testimony in the Cheshire home invasion trial of Stephen Hayes is going to begin in just a couple of hours. More disturbing testimony there yesterday, also graphic images in court.
Fox Connecticut's Tom Lewis is live in New Haven with more on the trial so far and where it's headed. Tom?
Good morning, Sarah. Very tough indeed to take some of the images that the jurors have to see. Much of what we learned yesterday came from the testimony of a state police detective who had interrogated Stephen Hayes, in which he confessed to raping and killing Jennifer Hawk Pettit. He gave a very bizarre excuse for why he did what he did. Also shown to the jurors some disturbing cell phone pictures taken of Joshua Komisarjevsky sexually assaulting 11-year-old Michaela, and the chief medical examiner also testified about exactly how the Pettit women died. The testimony from State Police Detective Anthony Buglione was graphic. Buglione had interrogated Hayes moments after his arrest, and Hayes was telling the detective that he had raped Jennifer Hawk Pettit after Joshua Komisarjevsky sexually assaulted 11-year-old Michaela. Hayes said Komisarjevsky ordered him to rape Jennifer to square things up. And adding to the heartbreak, cell phone pictures taken by Komisarjevsky of what he did with the Pettit's youngest daughter. Hayes painted a picture of two career criminals desperate for money, of a robbery that went horrifically wrong. The medical examiner testified about the final moments of Haley and Michaela, saying soot was found in Michaela's voice box, signs of smoke inhalation when the house was set on fire. Both bodies were burned, but Dr. Wayne Carver couldn't say whether the burns occurred while the girls were still alive. After the day's testimony, Dr. Pettit briefly spoke with the media outside the courthouse.
It was another tough and painful day for the Hawk and Pettit families, and I think everybody saw that who listened to the testimony, but that's all I have to say.
Okay, a very difficult time, as you might imagine, for Dr. Pettit. Now, in that interrogation, Hayes went on to say how he met Komisarjevsky, saying they met at a halfway house, began to hatch this idea. They went to Walmart. They bought some BB guns. They intended simply to scare the family, able to get inside the home through an unlocked door. They found Dr. Pettit asleep on the couch. They beat him with a baseball bat, and when things went sour, they left the home. The home was set on fire. Now, Dr. Wayne Carver expected to be back on the stand here in just a few hours to continue his testimony in this very troubling trial of Stephen Hayes. Live outside the courthouse, Tom Lewis, Fox Connecticut.
The 2007 Cheshire home invasion case has raised plenty of discussion about Connecticut's death penalty. It's an emotional issue gripping the entire state.
The death penalty debate. Controversial, fiery, explosive, sure to ignite tense discussion on both sides, for and against.
I think you have to be very careful, making sure there's no doubt whatsoever.
I'm against death penalty, just because it's irreversible.
The horrific, cold-blooded murder of a Cheshire family has now fueled the debate.
We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says that her husband and children are being held at their house.
July 23, 2007, Jennifer Hawk Pettit caught on a bank surveillance camera in what turned out to be a desperate attempt to withdraw money to save her family.
She is petrified. She wasn't going to call the police, but I came in my office and I did.
Minutes later, the heart-wrenching aftermath. Pettit and her two daughters were found dead in their charred, ransacked home. Her husband, Dr. William Pettit, was beaten and bruised but managed to escape. The prime suspects in the case, Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky. 3 years later, the gruesome details of the case are now playing out in New Haven Superior Court. On trial, Stephen Hayes. He's facing the death penalty.
Most people would agree that if you don't prosecute this case as a death penalty, what could you ever prosecute as a death penalty?
If convicted, Hayes and Komisarjevsky will join 10 men already on Connecticut's death row. The last person to die in the death chamber, Michael Ross, a self-confessed serial killer dubbed the Roadside Strangler. He murdered and raped 8 young women during a 3-year period in the 80s. He was executed 5 years ago.
Quinnipiac law professor Bill Dunlap joins us now to discuss the death penalty in Connecticut. Good morning, Professor. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for waking me up.
We appreciate it. First, let's just talk about the death penalty in our state, the history of it, how it's evolved over the years.
The current death penalty statute dates back to 1973. a year after the Supreme Court struck down all of the death penalties in the country. And it's essentially designed to make sure that it's not arbitrary, that there are very specific factors that the jury has to focus on before it can decide to give somebody the death penalty rather than life imprisonment.
And what are those specific factors? Are we having mic problems? Oh, it fell in. That's okay. Keep talking, Professor. What are those specific factors that they have to focus on? Because now it went from the past to in the 90s, now it's lethal injection, which that wasn't always the case, correct?
That's true. It was the electric chair originally because there were problems developing that, and with that across the country, many states changed to lethal injection. But the important part, I think, is the procedures that this law and the law of most states with the death penalty have put in to make sure this is not arbitrary. In order to be capital murder in the first place, one of 8 factors has to be satisfied, and both Hayes and Komisarjevsky have been charged with murder in the course of a kidnapping, murder in the course of a sexual assault, killing somebody under the age of 16, and committing multiple murders at the same time, and any one of those would qualify this as capital murder. But after that, the jury still has to weigh aggravating factors against mitigating factors. And if I were the prosecutor, I think I would try and persuade the jury that this was a particularly heinous or cruel act, which is one of the aggravating factors.
Right. Talk about being for or against the death penalty, because people that are for it, even some people against it, are saying, if not when, if not now, when with these 2 men, Hayes and Komisarjevsky?
I think this is, as several people have pointed out on the air recently, a poster child for the death penalty. If there is such a thing as a proper case for the death penalty, this is probably it, because it's just so horrific. But there are many people who think that the death penalty is simply wrong, that it's wrong to kill people, even in retaliation for killing. Some libertarians will say that the state does not have the power or the right to execute individuals. And the strongest argument is probably that if we have a death penalty as a deterrent against murder, it doesn't seem to be working. Connecticut has the highest murder rate in New England, and the states with the death penalty along the East Coast have the highest murder rates. So it's hard to say. There are valid issues of retribution and punishment. Whether it actually works or not is a different question.
If it helps, and then some people are saying, well, why should we pay for him in prison? Now, you're going to be doing a web chat this morning, so anyone can log on to ctnow.com and ask Professor Dunlap any questions that you have about the death penalty. And obviously, too, this is going to be a big issue with the upcoming governor's race, because Jody Rell is for the death penalty, and we have Dan Malloy, who opposes it, and Tom Foley, who supports it. So log on to ctnow.com and ask Professor Dunlap any questions that you have. Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about the mic problems, but
so
you did
my
a great
fault,
job.
probably.
Logan, over to you.
Sarah, Professor, we appreciate it.